I was talking to a collapsitarian, and he goes, "Oh, freedom isn't possible until the whole society collapses." I go, "Okay, it collapses. That's great. That's great." And then now, as it starts reforming, who's around you? It's a bunch of authoritarians. And what are the authoritarians going to say? Well, the problem is we weren't authoritarian enough. Now, if you come out of a collapse and it's a bunch of libertarians, our answers are going to be quite different.
Hello. Hey guys, I know we normally didn't do this live. Sometime, more often than not, we do these lives, but we've been transitioning to doing a lot of these interviews offline. So I appreciate you guys coming in, checking out on the YouTube of the Rumble. And I think it gives us a lot of advantages to do these offline. We get to meet the schedule of other people, whatever their schedule is. Not to say that Dennis wasn't able to hit our schedule. He certainly was. But also just it's better for editing, better for a lot of things. So I appreciate you guys coming here. And so tonight or this morning, whenever it is that you're watching this on YouTube or Rumble, you will be seeing Dennis Pratt. Now, if you are a libertarian, Dennis Pratt is a man that needs no introductions. There are a few people that you just know. And if you're a baby libertarian, maybe you don't know that much about the FSP, New Hampshire, or, some of the old heads of libertarianism, not to make any ageist jokes. But if you are one of those people, I'd love to see Dennis Pratt. I'd love to see how you introduce yourself. Hello, welcome, Fabian Liberty. So happy to have this conversation. Who are you?
Hello, Fabian Liberty. Yes, thank you so much for having me on here. My name is Dennis Pratt. I'm a 43-year libertarian. I came from the left, and I'm primarily an ethical libertarian, primarily concerned with self-ownership and what the implications thereof are, and how we can actually work that out into society. And this has been a real drive of mine for decades and decades. I've tried almost every way that I can think of to try to advance liberty. And I'm now 5 years into working with the Free State Project. Very excited about the program here, and very excited about what we're doing and its prospects. So if anything, I'm a big shill for the Free State Project. I moved here 5 years ago. Before I grew up in New York City, New Jersey, undergrad, grad in Chicago, grad in Boston, and then about 40 years some in a research lab in the Boston area. But since I've been up here, I've been volunteering a lot. The Free State Project is a lot about volunteering to create this libertarian homeland. So I've been working at Pork Fest is probably where I'm best known. I've run it for the last 3 years as the head. I was co-head 4 years ago, and I've been working on it for 5 years. So I kind of redesigned it, doubled its size in terms of attendees, and increased its number of events by about sevenfold. So we're around 1,000 events now. So that's been probably my best known success here. But I started the Shell with a number of other people, so I start coalitions. But the Shell is our probably our premier Liberty clubhouse in New Hampshire. We have several. I help.
And that's a part of
others.
Swell, correct?
Yeah. So Swell stands for Seacoast Welcomes Every Liberty Lover. And when I came out to the Seacoast, I was very excited because we had another Liberty clubhouse here. What I didn't realize was that it was actually a kind of a closed clubhouse. It was only for young professional families. I mean, we're empty nesters, so it was a little bit hard for me to join. But once we got in, what I wanted to do was open it up and have lots of events. And they were like going, no, we like it being small. So I first created Swell, which welcomes all the Liberty lovers in the Seacoast region. We have 6-7 regions depending on how you count here in the Free State. And then we decided that we actually needed a specific place, so we created the Shell. We opened it up. We opened it up the week that basically our governor shut down the state and said that you couldn't have any more than 6 people in a room. And the next weekend, we had 70 gun carrying libertarians all in a room watching Robbie the Fire and a couple of other New York City comedians who had escaped because they couldn't perform in New York. But we were alive and active here in the Free State and enjoying them. It's been a great resource here. The Shell has.
Your experience with COVID sounds the beginnings of COVID lockdown. I should say just the lockdowns. COVID is well, one, it's a banned word on YouTube for a lot of reasons, so I shouldn't talk about it for that reason. But two, also, to put the impetus on the state, right? Because it really was the state that was the issue. Sounds a lot better than mine. You got to watch Robbie the Fire Bernstein with a bunch of other libertarians. Sounds like New Hampshire is the place to be. And I definitely want to talk about the FSP and New Hampshire and a lot of that. Ton of questions, a ton of things to talk about in that domain. But just kind of like warming up. You have this thing, like kind of a LinkedIn section of your old quorum, right? And I was really curious what is this joke? Or is this a real thing? This chef reticitor de reves at personal growth, which is chief director of your dreams at your own personal, or director of your dreams, depending on how you translate it, of personal growth. Is that a real job? Or is that a cheeky libertarian nod to the people that choose to understand just a minimal amount of French?
Chef de reb. No, what that was I started up a group in Massachusetts around personal growth, and in 4 years we had 4,500 members. We were doing 250 events a year, and we had about 120 different personal growth groups, everything from memory enhancement to relationships to goal setting and goal achievement, things like that. So that was a real passion project for me, because I do a lot of personal. So I see freedom. If you see my symbol behind me, at the bottom line, there's a peace sign. And so much of what I'm trying to do is achieve peace. And a part of that's internal peace. And so that for me was kind of the personal growth part. And then there's the external piece, which is the libertarian part of how we can actually have peace between people. So I saw it was actually Mary Ruwart who inspired me to start the Personal Growth Network in Massachusetts. She convinced me that there was this group of people who were, primarily from the left, but they were people who accepted personal responsibility, really believed that we were the architects of our own lives, could take control of our lives, and respected people individually. And I was part of that community, and I knew that that was true. So I was like going, yeah, that sounds really good. And she goes, well, isn't that kind of libertarianism? And I said, in a way it is. So I was going, at that point, I was still kind of thinking that it's pretty much impossible to actually create a libertarian society. I was desperately looking for different ways to create a libertarian society. I had come out of a 4-year effort to do to help parents have their kids escape from the government schools. I thought that was a backward.
I just want to interrupt for just a second, because just point of clarification. When you say create a libertarian society, you don't mean like a commune or a small community, but you mean instead impossible to create like a nation or like a very large. Is that what you mean when you say impossible to create a liberty? Okay, cool.
Yeah, and much later, I would be introduced to the freedom cell concepts, where you have a group of 6 to 10 people, interacting and supporting each other and things like that. But I actually thought that, when I first came to libertarianism, and I saw the beauty of this idea, and I said, this is like the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And I thought all I had to do was just communicate its beauty, and we would have so many people joining us. and
Mm.
embracing this beauty. So I've tried so many different ways to convince people of its soundness, of its ethics, of its beauty, of its empowerment of each individual, of its wealth generation ability. I mean, there's just so many positives of this. And in large part, I mean, I was one of the most successful um, writers on libertarian topics on Quora. And I know that I did convert a lot of people there, but it was just a small sliver of people, and I
Mhm.
couldn't generally convert people who weren't in this what I called an open and curious segment. It was a very small segment of people who were curious enough that they could examine questions. They weren't too scared that their neighbors and people would ostracize them. They were really looking after truth. They were very logically consistent. I have a number of characteristics that I think are really good indicators of somebody who might be open to libertarianism.
Hold on. So
Um,
before, so you're saying you have a number of characteristics. That's an interesting thing that I hadn't heard before. So almost like a virtue ethicist, kind of like these are the values. If you see these values
mhm.
present, these virtues present in an individual, this is someone that you should maybe not necessarily harass, but target with libertarian ideals and see if they're receptive to them because you believe that that type of person would be naturally receptive to that ideology.
Yeah. I think a lot of the people in the Free State Project have given up on the idea of large scale conversion. That you
Hmm.
just can't do it. Most people, they've been brainwashed since childhood. They're continuing to be brainwashed every day by the media and movies and discussions around the water cooler um, and so that conversion process. My thought, which was all I have to do is to speak this truth, and people will
Hmm.
see it, and people will fall in line, and we can all hold hands and kumbaya to this freed society. I don't believe it anymore. And I think that that's maybe one of the characteristics of somebody who might be interested in the Free State Project is somebody who is despairing a little bit that the conversion strategy that we can actually convert 100 million, 200 million Americans to libertarianism, that just isn't really necessarily possible. Instead, what we think, what a lot of us think, and it's certainly not universal, but a lot of us think is that libertarianism is really at this stage of its diffusion and at the current level of authoritarianism indoctrination, libertarianism is really available only to a small set of humans who are in that you can call it the open and curious segment, the logically consistent, disagreeable, so they're not concerned about social norms and going up against the crowd. There's a number of characteristics I think that you could actually say these are more likely to be able to be open to this argument. I think
So,
our arguments are sound. The beauty is gorgeous. The empiricism is pretty hard to refute. The trouble is that the human isn't available to it. They're just not
so let
available
me
to it.
let me ask you here. You had an old post that I think on Quora that I think I really resonated with that talks a lot about this, right? And I say I resonate with this because I've had a similar thought, maybe not the same analogy, which is you wrote a post about why is it that people hate libertarians so much, and you wrote a post basically like saying it's like, well, what if you were in a tribe of people sacrificing a young virgin to make sure that the volcano doesn't erupt. And then in comes the libertarian that says, hey, this person has a right to bodily autonomy. This person, like, you're morally evil in an objective framework, by violating the non-aggression principle. Even further, if they're Hoppian from like a, argumentation ethics, they'll say that you're denying the very ideas of logic and proving yourself to be a beast of irrational thought, incapable of arguing for one's own morality. And so I've had that kind of thought too, which is that, like, if people accept libertarianism, then they have to accept that basically everything they've ever advocated for politically in their life has been a moral evil, and they have been a part of that moral evil. And what I've found is that it isn't until someone has a life-altering event that wakes them up before they, in my opinion, in my experience, that people are really receptive to it. Like, a family member is completely destroyed by the police state, or like a judge like ruins a family member's life, or some type of government thing comes in, or like something destroys the family business, or it's something deeply seated and personal that kind of breaks through the wool. And I find it very, very difficult for philosophical and ethical arguments to kind of break through, decades of indoctrination. And I see the same thing with objectivism, which is very similar to libertarianism, especially considering that the word libertarian probably originated in its usage, and especially the non-aggression principle probably came from Ayn Rand, not Rothbard. And we kind of just went off with it. But when they say, altruism is evil, it's such a difficult concept for people to get that they must point the finger and say, you're crazy. And so I guess with this whole thing and kind of you bringing this up and like this kind of doomer-pilled situation, what is it that you think we can do to get around this kind of weakness as communicators of libertarianism and liberty and these ideals? Because I want to share this beauty, and I think what most people see is a bunch of autistic people telling them that they're evil, right? And it's like, that's clearly not working that well.
Well, it's even worse than that, Scott. I mean, you're also saying that everyone who raised you lied to you, and retarded you in a way, and crippled you and put you up on a sacrificial as a sacrificial lamb to the state. It also puts you at odds with all the people around you. So that social, that being on the outside amongst your social circles, it risks your job. It is a very, very hard thing to accept. Well, I have this conversation often, and I have so many people tell me, well, all we have to do is communicate it like this and like that. And, I've communicated for decades, and I'm actually pretty damn successful at communicating it. And I invite anybody who knows this perfect way of communicating it to do it. Please do it. If it would obviate anyone having to move for the Free State Project. It would obviate, it would stop all the mass murders of war. It would stop all the retardation of innovation. It would allow us all to be free to explore all different types of innovations and futures. So I invite you. I'm just unimpressed. I mean, you said that it's a particular instance, and I don't think that that's enough. I don't think that that's sufficient. What I've found, for example, is that there's a lot of people, a lot of groups that I've helped in when they're getting whomped on by the state, and they think I'm great. They think, oh my goodness, I'm actually helping a Democratic group right now. And they're getting whomped on, and they want some help, and I'm coming in with ethical arguments. They love it, but I have to tell you, they are not going to become libertarians. Most of them will not become libertarians, and they're just going to say, well, that worked on that situation. I'm going to retain my authoritarianism now, especially once I get the upper hand. I'm going to now advance there. So if I could clarify for just a moment, when I said that moment, right, I mean that there is a triggering moment that creates a chink in the armor. That doesn't mean that the knight is unarmored, right? It just means there's a weakness. There's a place that it could crack. There is an avenue by which the libertarian can explain and elucidate like what has happened to them and help them resolve it. But it is just as easy for a person to, especially the more intelligent they are, actually, to utilize their own kind of predispositions and ideas and philosophical groundwork to explain away reality
until they're back in their comfortable little hobby hole. I just wanted to clarify that I don't think that like people magically become libertarian because of like some
Oh,
instance of being fucked over by the state.
yeah. No. But what I'm saying is that it may require some sort of traumatic experience. You
Mm-hmm.
may be right about that, but I still think that it's characteristics of the individual that will actually be the higher predictor of whether the person is going to be able to uncover his libertarianism.
Okay,
Um,
I had
and
no
that
idea the interview was going to go this way, but I want to stop, right? Because I want to know what is this hierarchy of libertarian virtues made manifest that you can see in other people as a means of being like, these are the people you should be talking to. Like what and do you have a
Yeah,
copy of
I
this to
have,
send to
I
people or
have,
something?
I do so many different projects. One of my big projects, someday, maybe someday, is actually developing a questionnaire. I have a number
Mm,
of areas, but let me just give you an example. I think one of the most important things is logical consistency. So when you have A and not A, so when you're
mm.
faced with some sort of contradiction, it keeps you up at night. It bugs you. It causes you to kind of you think about it and wrestle with it, especially if it's in an area of cognitive dissonance and it's still going to bother you. Now if you're the type of person that goes A, not A, well, that's just the way it is. Da, 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 da. I don't think that libertarianism is really, I mean,
Well,
you might vote libertarian once, but you're
mhm.
not going to be a libertarian.
So so
You might
so
go
here's
along with the crowd if the rest of the crowd is libertarian, and you just kind of float along with them, but you
God,
won't actually understand this ethic.
I don't want to disagree with the great Dennis Pratt. I don't want to, right? But I'm always going to be honest about my opinions. I I don't know that that's a virtue, or that that's a personality, or that that's a characteristic of people.
Mm,
Instead, what it seems like you're doing is you're describing the natural enemy to both objectivism, libertarianism, rationalism, realism,
mhm,
which is Hegelian dialectics. And so
mm,
when if you're describing individuals that think very dialectically, right, that the world is full of contradictions and that those contradictions are okay, and that
mm,
recognizing those contradictions just means that something's wrong in the world, not something wrong with your thinking or your logic. um, it sounds like what you're describing is not a type of person so much as an individual that has been captured by an ideology already, which
mm,
is leftism or Hegelianism.
mhm,
And that is not, when I say leftism, I don't mean Democrats, right? I mean a critical theory, Marxist materialist dialectics, Hegelianism, Marcuse, all of these branches of leftist thought that also invade the right. I like to call many on the right that call themselves conservatives, I like to call them family values consequentialists, because at the end of the day, they're really just kind of like left wing in their thinking. Um,
mhm,
and so, yeah, I don't know I don't disagree that that is a person not worth targeting, but not
mhm.
because that's a type of person so much as that is a person that is already, even if they don't know it, been captured by our opposing ideology.
Yeah, yeah, and you might very well be right. I mean, you use the word virtue. I use the word characteristic, and I'm not
Mhm.
saying where that comes from,
Like a
but I
typology.
just know. But it's just darn hard to convert somebody like that. Um,
Yeah.
uh, the another type of person that's going to be extraordinarily hard to convert is somebody who wants to fit in. They want to fit in
Mm,
with the crowd, and
mm,
they're scared of what the crowd might think, and they're if they being different is extraordinarily dangerous to them. So this person is just, at least in our diffusion state now, this person is pretty much incapable of going against the 90, I don't know what number, but 90 plus percent of people who are thinking authoritarian. Um, and you know,
mhm.
I wouldn't spend much time. I wouldn't spend much time with somebody who is logically inconsistent. I wouldn't spend much time on somebody who is too scared of what other people might think. They're just not approachable. And I think there's other characteristics. What the Free State
You know,
Project says is we don't really care how you came to libertarianism. If you came to libertarianism, um, and you really want to live in a libertarian society, we know that one of the main characteristics of a libertarian society is going to be libertarians. So we're going to gather all the libertarians, or the libertarians who are willing to come together into that society and actually work, instead of trying to convert the inconvertible. Instead of wasting our lives, I've spent 40 some years working on this. Instead of spending your lives, bashing your head into walls of indifference and incapability, instead of doing that, you can actually come to one place and have an army of libertarians behind you and work to actually build a libertarian society. And frankly, there's a lot of people out there who you could talk to them theory and theory up the wazoo, but it may actually have require showing them as opposed to talking at them.
So with that in mind, before I transition real quick, I just want to say it's kind of funny that you named two types of people not to go after, and those would be the two types of people that would be the most susceptible to cults. And it's like when you say it like that, you're like, well, no wonder libertarianism hasn't caught on. It's like the two types. If you're a cult leader, right? You're looking for people that are cool with contradictions and like not super logically minded, and you're looking for people that have a deep desire to fit in. Like those are the two people you want for a cult. But I just thought that was funny. I was like, oh well, no wonder it's not working. So I guess I want to maybe back up, probably where we should have started, also where my plans started. And I want to ask two questions together because you're very good at weaving multiple questions together. So I think we can do this. And so like the first base question is, what is the Free State Project, right? And follow up on that, right? Which is there is a deep misunderstanding that I've seen you having on Twitter, in Spaces, and a lot of other people when I've spoken, which is that there are these four things, and many people, newbie libertarians, classical liberals, people from the outside, don't realize these are four totally different things with overlap. And maybe you could explain that a little bit from your perspective. And these four things are the Libertarian Party, the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire, the Free State Project, and libertarianism as a philosophy. And I think people don't realize this isn't one big ball. There's important differences here. And if you could explain kind of like what the Free State Project is in this and kind of how it differs from these three things and is similar to these things, hopefully this will help people better understand what the FSP is in totality.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so the Free State Project's been going on for about 20 years now. And it is a mass migration of libertarians to one small region where we'll have enough libertarians to actually create a libertarian society. You can think of it as Mormons going to Utah, or Jews going to Israel, or gays going to San Francisco, or the Chinese going to Chinatown. It's just, what do we need? The most important thing that we need is libertarians. One of my best articles on Quora is the answer to the question of why libertarianism isn't like Somalia. And one of the first things I write, I have like 6 major points. The first one is that there aren't any libertarians in Somalia. The first thing you need is libertarians. Well, why are those authoritarians in Somalia not libertarian? They're not libertarians. So what the Free State Project said was look, there's all these other different strategies for trying to create a libertarian society. They've all largely failed. And there's a number of society of strategies that try to isolate yourself and insulate yourself and give you a chance amongst authoritarians. And those are likely to fail as well. And then there's also always the depression and giving up or just whining online. But if
Hmm.
you're really serious about libertarianism, what we need to do is get the people who somehow, some way, escaped their authoritarian brainwashing, and get them all in one place and actually build that libertarian society. And it's not
Hmm.
just politics. It's not just going and getting into office. I mean, we have ANCAPs in office here in New Hampshire. Uh, but it's building liberty clubhouses and liberty networks. It's building food networks. It's building crypto networks. We're the number one crypto state in the country. We're the number one or number two gun state in the country. These are all activities that people are doing. We're fantastic in homeschooling, fantastic in alternative schooling. So we have all these people working. We have an army of libertarians all in one state working in different ways to actually enact a libertarian society. Now we're pretty far away, but boy, we've made some major progress. And it's just such a relief to stop whining about liberty. And why won't our rulers give us liberty? Or why won't my grandmother understand why libertarianism is the way to go? Or, how, why can't I fool the electorate into voting for me and voting for all the other libertarians, and then we'll create a libertarian society, and the electorate will never realize what happened, even though they remained authoritarian. So instead of doing that, we just say, hey, there's a simple solution here, guys, and we move. Now, the Free State Project is all it is it's seven people in a board with one employee now, and their job is primarily to say, hey, come to New Hampshire if you love liberty. If you love liberty and you actually want it for real in your lifetime, come here and help us build it, because that's what we're doing. We're not messing around with any of this other stuff. We're building it. We're not converting people. We're building liberty. So that's all that is. So when the people talk about the Free State Project, that's the office itself is that. The Free State movement is all those thousands of libertarians who've moved here and actually creating hundreds of different groups, and are actually building it. One of those groups is called the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire. It's got about 180 members. It's a very big Twitter. I mean, we have, we tend to get the most base libertarians moving here. If you think about what types of libertarians are going to move and actually build liberty, it's going to be people who are pretty damn serious about liberty, and that shows up on Twitter and social media in terms of follows. So little New Hampshire,
Libertarian Party of New Hampshire is certainly a controversial group when discussing their Twitter.
Yep.
I'm pretty hardcore. I'm permanently banned from Twitter for being too based, and I have called out LPNH multiple times. Like, dude, this is a terrible strategy for doing anything other than getting engagement and getting us bad press. Like, what are you doing? That being said, I've spoken with a couple of the people that handle LPNH's Twitter account before, and they're good people. I believe in what it is that they're doing, and they have a different strategy than I have, which is sometimes doing things for clicks.
Oh yeah, quite different strategy.
But
I mean, if your strategy,
I just had to point that out there for anybody watching, because there will be people, libertarians, that watch them like, oh, we're just letting the LPNH one slide. It's like, I think they're a little ridiculous sometimes, but at the same time, like, I do respect what they're trying to do. If they could just shut the fuck up just stop talking about like Jews and stop making bad jokes, we'd be so much better. Like, it would be so much better.
Well, a lot of people here also would agree with some of the jokes. Although I have to tell you, in terms of shifting the Overton window, we've probably done that better than anyone. And we're smashing the Overton window. I'll just give an example here. One of the first tweets that got us into trouble was a tweet about how children laboring in the workplace actually learn more than they do in government schooling.
You know what? Hold on.
And we got slaughtered for that one. We had, I think Spike slaughtered us. If not Spike, it was Gary Johnson came after us, and I think
Who cares
JoJo
what Gary
came after
Johnson?
us.
Sorry, I'm sorry. Look, I'm going to be a dick because like I'm not like a lot of these other libertarian people, which is probably why I don't have a Twitter account and I'm not famous. Which is, I have no problem saying things like I don't give a fuck what Gary Johnson has to say about libertarianism. He's a classical liberal at best. He's a fucking room temperature IQ dolt at worst.
Right.
Like, I don't care what he has to say about libertarianism. Sorry. Even if he's done more than me, don't care.
But what I'm saying is that we got slaughtered from a lot of the people who are principled in other strategies that are not the Free State Project strategy, right? They are not the concentration. We're doing a concentration strategy. So,
Yeah.
for example, if you're doing a camouflage strategy and one of your quote unquote allies says, "Hey, we think that parents should be able to have their kids labor if they want," and that's perfectly fine. Now, if you're trying to appear like you're kind of like within the Overton window and you want everyone to kind of accept you, you're a little bit more managerial. You can keep costs lower, etc.
Just the
you don't want someone coming up and saying libertarian things like we should get rid of child labor laws. Now, the truth is that a lot of people have learned quite a bit circumventing child labor laws. We homeschooled our child, and my daughter was working at age 10. And she's very successful now, and the most competent person that you could think of, because she was out in the real world working with real adults at a young age. So I mean, we believe that we're not doing camouflage, so therefore we don't camouflage. We're not doing supplication to our rulers, so therefore we don't worry about what the rulers say. And so when we say something controversial, and everyone's going, "Oh, that's true," but we're not allowed to say it, we don't care. We don't, because we're not doing your strategy. And I understand that it's upsetting to you because you still believe in the conversion strategy, but we're doing a different strategy. And the reason why our strategy,
you say you ain't talking about me.
No, I'm saying
the
people
I went on to Hippy Dippy Rumble, which was like at the time the largest political Twitch politics debate scene, and 2v2'd with another anarcho-capitalist. Well, he's an egoist, so he follows the net because it's morally preferential, but close enough. And debated child labor laws and why we should abolish child labor laws, and brought up Colombia and how it doesn't work there. Brought up 1997 UNICEF studies that showed that when they abolished it in Bangladesh, all that they did was increase sex trafficking and increase workplace injuries because people were afraid of labor in the ready-made garment industry. So then they worked in seedier places, in like terrible places. And the data just goes to show that all of the problems of child labor have nothing to do with, child labor does not disappear with child labor laws. It has very little effect, if any, on actual child labor. What does is when people make about $12,000 to $15,000 GDP per household. Once you get to a certain amount of money, you don't force your kids to work bad jobs to feed the family. The only reason your kids work is if you as a parent believe that there's some value to be gained by a child. And like maybe that's working in the family restaurant, learning the family business. Maybe that's, doing a paper route or a lemonade stand or something fun, cutting grass that like teaches them the value of money and labor, etc. And so I just want to point that out there. If we're talking shit on, when I'm talking shit on LPNH, sometimes I'm just like, okay, that one's dumb. Overall, I agree with the say it loud, say it based, and then prove why every one of your detractors is wrong with logical arguments, and fuck the consequences.
Well, the reason I bring that up was just that the shift in the Overton window was gigantic. We had a lot of the regime libertarians come after us. We had a lot of the election libertarians come after us. And I understand why they come after us. They don't want us saying things like this, but it's important to say this because it's libertarian. And the state should not control us. They should not control our children. They shouldn't be threatening us with violence or threatening the children, of course, and the children into government institutions, and forcing them to labor for make believe problems in a make believe location, such that the kid thinks that he has no value whatsoever. I personally love child labor because it teaches them that they have value and they can actually create value. It makes them a productive member, and they understand how adults actually work. It's harkens back to when you would take the young man on a hunt and show them how we hunters hunt, and and they get excited. They're not tuning out. They're going, oh, this is what it is to be a man. This is what it is to be a woman. This is how I can actually make my way. And I'm seeing that, and I'm actually able to start doing it. But anyway, we actually passed a law within 6 months here in New Hampshire. But so much of what we're doing here is signaling, and LPNH is signaling for a particular type of libertarian to come here, a very base libertarian, one who isn't scared to say child labor laws should be removed.
Okay, so
one who isn't scared to say that the private parts of the Civil Rights Act should be removed, should be ended. I mean, the people who are too scared to say those things, LPNH.
So let me, if I can clean this up,
excited about them.
If I can clean this up, I presented the idea, like, what's the difference between the LP, the LPNH, the FSP, and libertarianism as a philosophy? And it seems like, and please correct me if I'm wrong, or add some nuance. Seems like what you're saying is, look, the LP is a national movement, and because it's a national movement, it by definition has to have a different strategy, and that strategy is one of incrementalism, is one of camouflage, is one of moving the Overton window towards liberty slowly, in the hopes that we live in a slightly freer society over time that will eventually can become one thing. And that's the name of my channel, right? Fabian Liberty. I believe in a Fabian strategy. Or at least one of them is that. And that the LPNH is, in many ways, it represents New Hampshire. And while it's not quite the FSP, it is beholden to the people of New Hampshire that are the most hardcore. And because of that, their strategy is a little different. Their strategy is, let's bring more liberty people to our state, not necessarily let's bring slightly more libertarian policy to the state of Libertarian Party in New Hampshire. And so it must signal to those hardcore libertarians, what are you doing? Get your ass here. This is where people aren't afraid to say the scary things. Yeah. And then, of course, there's the libertarian philosophy that kind of overarches with all four.
Yeah, we're not scared to say it, and we're not scared to do it. And that's what we're doing. We're doing a lot. We're doing a lot of this, but I went through most of the different strategies, including the depression phase. And I think that most libertarians actually fall into that depression stage, especially if you're really passionate about this. You bang your head into the wall, whether you're doing supplication or electoral or conversion or what have you, and you do it year after year after year after year, and you're not seeing any progress, and you go, oh my God, I'm just going to give up. And, I'm just going to pretend like I'm going to ignore it. We're saying don't ignore it. You're right. Look, this is important. Libertarianism is extraordinarily important. We're ending a 6,000-year slavery to rulers, and it's extraordinarily hard. And of course, our rulers want us to be feckless. They want us to be impotent. So they want us to work on
literally sometimes
that don't work. They want us to work
microplastics. Look into it,
They want us to work on strategies that will not work and waste our lives on that. And we're saying, look, guys, there's one place where you can come and it's not going to be ineffective. You can come here and, maybe you don't be part of the LPNH because, we only have a couple hundred people involved in the LPNH. And to get on the Twitter team, you have to be like, you have to be world class. They're going to be teaching what LPNH did in classes in terms of communications. It is that
Its
effective.
successes and its
We started
failures.
with 4,000
Certainly.
followers. Started with 4,000 followers. We're now around 52, 54,000. So Texas was the largest one with 24,000 when we started. And now,
Yeah.
Texas is around 29 or something, 30, and
Look,
we're lapping them. We're doubling their size.
look. Sure, I'm all for it, right? And that's dope. I appreciate it. Engagement isn't always necessarily good if the engagement is mostly authoritarian people that have very little experience with libertarianism, utilizing these people as the people to paint as to why libertarianism is the worst idea ever and why it's fascist or why it's full of a bunch of crazy people that are insane. Like, you can get a lot of engagement. That doesn't necessarily mean that engagement is positive, right? And even still, the numbers you're citing are still, those are rookie numbers for an OnlyFans girl on Twitter. You know what I mean? Like, so I mean, like, yeah, I'm with it. But I do agree with it. I do think they're based, but I do think there are some issues there too. And I think there's good lessons to be learned and bad lessons to be learned about LPNH's social media, and the foray into the public, right? There's certainly been times where the well has been poisoned by LPNH.
Oh yeah.
I'll give you an example, right? And I don't want to be.
You're talking about a particular the well of a particular strategy. We don't care. We're looking for is out of that, out of the 54,000 followers. What percentage of those people really are base libertarians? What percentage of them have really tried all these different ways? What percentage of them are really starting to think, yeah, I'm sick and tired of losing. I'm sick and tired of losing, and I'm ready to actually go to some place where I can win. Those are the people we want to alert. We exist. We want them to start being curious about us. We want them to come and visit us, and eventually move and actually roll up their sleeves and help us build. And so, you're living amongst a bunch of cannibals, and you're saying, hey, you're not convincing any of the cannibals, and the cannibals are not going to like us. I go, yeah, but you're living amongst cannibals. I understand you're trying to camouflage yourself amongst cannibals. You're living amongst cannibals. Stop living amongst the cannibals. Come and live amongst the decent human beings.
I feel like that's bad faith. I think that's bad faith, right? I think there are plenty of people that call themselves libertarians that are not decent human beings, right? And I think there are plenty of people that are authoritarian minded, but their day-to-day interactions are honorable in many ways. They're simply propagandized into a false ideology without knowing it. And I think there are examples, right? Like, I'm trying to be charitable, right? But there are examples, and I'll give one, right? One of the ones that they do is they talk about doctors, right? They put out this tweet, and this is just off the top of my head, so I'm paraphrasing. But basically, they put out a chart of doctors signing up, and then there's like this plateau effect, right? And they say, doctors, something along the lines of like they don't even mention the government. They only mention the AMA and like stopping people from like becoming doctors, like artificially reducing the amount of doctors in the market. And they say doctors are all evil people. And they made it, and it's like, look, if you only have one goal, and the one goal is who are the libertarians out there that are super hardcore but have never heard of the state of New Hampshire existing, then like, sure, that's a great tweet for that goal. I at this point, I don't think that person exists. I don't think there is a person out there that is a super hardcore libertarian that's super passionate and willing to move and doesn't know that like about the Free State Project at least a little bit in New Hampshire and stuff. And it's like, and I remember seeing that and I was like, dude, you had such a perfect opportunity to look at that chart and say, look at how government monopoly destroys, look at how destructive this thing is. But instead you said, doctors are evil people. And everyone looking at that goes, well, I know doctors. What about ER doctors? Like, these are good people, right? And so like now all you've done is just made enemies to no fucking gain. Like, there are moments like that where I'm like, nah, there's being based and then there's just being dumb.
Now, do you understand, Scott, why we don't care about that?
Well, I mean, if you don't care about what the strategy of
Yeah, I mean,
of
you're
convincing
saying, well,
others.
all these people here, we don't think that the vast majority of people are convertible.
Mm-hmm.
You believe that they are convertible, and that if we hadn't said that, that we turned them off. We just don't think that they're particularly convertible. We think we know that you
Uh-huh.
have said, and you being people like yourself have
Yeah.
said that argument about the AMA over and over, and I heard that argument in the 80s.
Right.
So it's not like, oh, I have an idea. Why don't we just calmly explain this? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, what they went at it at an ethical basis. It is evil to with a gun prevent people from going into a profession, from prevent people from helping each other,
Mm-hmm.
um, and preventing and in order to create a cartel. That is an
Well,
evil
no,
act.
no, they didn't go at it from an ethical position. They went into they exaggerated the ethical position, right? To go at it from an ethical position would say that the doctors in the AMA, the doctors that are stopping this, the institutions that are stopping doctors are evil, right? They made a blatant statement about doctors in general, and it's like, I understand you're trying to challenge people's thinking and shock them, or at least in your approximation, you're just trying to signal to the base libertarians that we're not the pussies over here. Like, we get it done and we say what we want. And so I do empathize with that position a little bit, right? But what I think is that you say these people aren't convertible. And I think there are people practically that are definitely not convertible. Probably a majority of people practically that are not convertible. And yet every day a person is born, and they're, I don't want to say they're tabula rasa, blank slate, because there is, genetics, and there is the environment, and there is the family. But as the world and social media gets bigger and bigger, and as teenagers are using these things, right, I do think that there are malleable minds out there that aren't yet libertarians. That is a percentage of people. And I do think it is important that we do reach those people, as opposed to scare those people away unnecessarily. And so my question is what do you gain? What do you lose? Because, I mean, I'm not a consequentialist. I don't make the moral argument from a consequentialist perspective. I don't give a fuck what the consequences are as to whether or not something is morally justified or unjustified. But I am saying if we have goals, and we're rational men and we have goals, and we're seeking those goals, then we do want, to the best of our ability, to look at the consequences to see if our actions match our goals. And I think certain things like that are like, go really hard and like go a bridge too far in saying things that I think are anti-libertarian in the sense of like trying to be as libertarian as possible, become counterproductive to the point where they make those goals more difficult. But I agree with you that the camouflage people, the people that are like, don't talk about child labor laws, shut up. Yeah, I'm all with LPNH on that. Like, I have no problem being like, I'm an ANCAP and this is what I fucking believe. And like, I'll have those conversations and I'll tell you what I fucking believe. I got banned off of Twitter because I said, you ought to be able to run over protesters. And everyone was like, even other ANCAPs, yeah, they were like, don't say that. Don't say that. I'm like, no, it's kidnapping. And they're like, well, it's not kidnapping. I was like, look, if you can't go backwards and you can't go side to side, it's blocky and proviso. It's kidnapping. And as far as I'm concerned, I start my car slowly. I follow the gentleness principle. But if you want to keep getting under my tire, crunch, motherfucker. See if the World Economic Forum pays your fucking climate change activist fucking bills afterwards. I don't care. I got places to go. So like, I don't have, like I said, I'll say the base things. I just think sometimes we ought to be careful that we're not trying so hard to be shock jock and so libertarian that we end up saying things that aren't libertarian, because then they become weaknesses from multiple domains. Maybe that's what I meant to say.
Well, I think you're arguing here that a doctor who isn't part of the AMA cartelization, just participates in the cartelization, isn't evil. Is that your contention here?
Yeah, I would say it's a second order consequence, and I think
right. But you would agree that they're kind of a quisling.
Yeah, I would agree that it's just to be very specific, it's a second order kind of blame. They are not in any way, shape, or form doing those things, right? But they are participating in that thing, right? So by that nature, if we start saying that it is immoral from a second order perspective. That's stepping out of the realm of libertarianism, and that's stepping into a new philosophy that you're, because because if that's the case, then every single person who owns a computer, a webcam, a cell phone that isn't a fair phone, and they haven't deeply researched and made sure that they're using conflict-free minerals, is someone that is actively supporting slave labor, rape, and torture. So every libertarian with a webcam and a laptop and a cell phone, you're a slaver, and you're a rapist. Yeah, second order consequences start to get real fucking tricky. You know what I mean? How do you feel about that? Maybe that's the more interesting question.
Yeah, I mean, it is an interesting question. To what degree are we complicit, taking advantages of government violence? I tend to be like, hey, we gotta start cleaning our stuff up, and this forgiving, you get government teachers, and they're all, you all like your Mrs. Gadfly from second grade, and she's so great and all that type of stuff, but she's part of a system that is actually retarding the children, retarding a large number of those children. And it's extortion. It's part of an extortion racket. It's part of a kidnapping racket. It's part of a threatening the parents. It's an indoctrination program. And so, what is her complicity in here? I mean, I would like to actually create a society in which we extricate ourselves from that. Now, but if they're going out and participating in this program, they think it's totally fine, and libertarians go, yeah, it's okay that you do that. Is it okay? I mean, do we actually start saying, hey, start paying attention to what you're doing? Now, I don't want to argue that point. The primary purpose of a message like that is saying, we know what's going on here, guys, and we're not going to take the soft toe tap approach, which is what we have done for decades and decades and decades, and it has changed nothing. The cartelization of the medical associations is even greater now. It is harder to get in. The artificial barriers are harder. So whatever we've been doing, I mean, you can say, well, LPNA shouldn't do that. Well, okay, what should we do? Show me what you should
hilariously
do,
enough,
because it's not working.
Now when I look at it from a more FSP perspective, right, which isn't a lens I necessarily put on. I usually tend to look at it from just like a pure theory perspective, and then my own life. But when I look at it from an FSP perspective, and I look specifically at the medical industry and like in corruption and insurance and doctors and things like that, I'm struck with the idea that it's the Christian socialists that have created their own insurance co-ops, right, to get away from insurance industry, that have been able to help their fellow man more than anybody else. And it kind of makes me think like, maybe it's just the coalition of a group of people saying, fuck whatever that system is. We're going to do our own thing, and we're going to do it based upon our values, and we're going to fight against whatever thing attempts to invade against our own values. And in the Christian co-op kind of insurance systems have been really effective. Everybody that uses them loves them. The rich pay more, and they're usually willing to pay more. They pay progressive. They don't pay based off of their own health, but also how much money they make. But they're okay with that because they know that they're part of a Christian organization that's only helping other Christians, that isn't paying for abortions, that isn't paying for, things that they morally disagree with, right? Whatever those things are. And then they do like these GoFundMe things for like really expensive procedures that uses a model of both charity and a progressive kind of insurance system where everybody tends to come out happier and better. Unless of course you're trying to buy birth control. Then all of a sudden it's like, well, you pay out of pocket for that. But yeah, so I thought of it like that, and it's like, yeah, what if libertarians haven't done anything like that? And it's simply been the act of coalescing together amongst shared values and saying, fuck whatever that system is and the way that it's telling us we have to live. We're going to live the way that we want to live, that have been able to have those successes. And so like it does kind of, tend towards that FSP kind of idea of like,
Separate.
you guys can attempt to convert these people all you fucking want. Like, just shut the fuck up and get to New Hampshire. Like, I'm not going to move to New Hampshire. I'll put that in right now at the 1 hour mark. I'm not moving to New Hampshire for at least 15 years, but that's because I'm an every other weekend dad. I'm never going to be able to convince my ex to move to New Hampshire, and I'm not going to leave my kids. Right. So like, I'm gonna be wherever they are, but maybe in 15 years, if America still exists and New Hampshire's doing well, you'll see me there, but it is what it is.
Yeah, no, I think that there's a lot of power to say, let's separate. Look, those people are you can't really change their mind. The American Medical Association is getting way too much money. The doctors are making too much money, and they're not even thinking about this, right? I mean, in a way, calling them evil makes them, it's kind of a slap in the face. It's like saying, look at what you're doing, guy, as opposed to what we've been doing, which just hasn't worked. But, ultimately, what we want is in the authoritarian 49, you guys keep whatever the heck it is that's enslaving you, because we're not going to change you. And in New Hampshire, we're going to actually build out a system that is more free. It depends. It depends on who moves here, which systems we build and what they look like and that type of thing. But we're not pussyfooting around. We're not going to accept these types of rent seekers and enslavers and people like that. We're just not going to do that.
I want to
we are serious about freedom here. And we're not going to kind of wink and nod and go, I guess that's just the way the world is. We're libertarians, and we're saying, no, that's not the way the world has to be. The majority of the world has to be like that, okay? Just because we're so outnumbered. But if we get enough people in our little neck of the woods, we can have, the Mormon solution, or we can have the Jewish solution, or we can have the Chinese solution, or we can have the gay solution here. It will just be the libertarian solution. So, and that's really all we're doing.
Two things real quick before I transition. Let's not start with the Mormon solution. All right. Some of those solutions have been scary. And don't forget the Mennonites and the Beachy Amish. I think the Mennonites and the Beachy Amish, they get passed over a lot, despite the fact that these are very, very, very close to voluntarist societies in the way that they are communally together. And I think maybe it's because people still have this predisposition of thinking that like these are people that like think cameras will capture your soul, or that they're like crazy. And it's like they're anything but. Those are a very few small sects of people.
No, but I use the Mormons only as a breakaway separatist group that has distinctly different ways of organizing themselves than the general population. And that if they were to remain dispersed, if they were to separate themselves such that they are 1 out of 100 in some neighborhood where everyone else is authoritarian, or everyone else is anti-Mormon, or everyone else is anti-gay, they are going to be miserable for the rest of their lives. But by coming together, they can actually get more of what they want and build it together. And that's what we're doing.
For sure. I just mean like the Mormons that can be controversial,
I'm not
but there's no
the
need
Mormons
to go there.
or the gays.
Yeah.
I'm not defending anyone except libertarians.
My ex is Mormon, and she's I learned a lot from them. They're very based in a lot of ways, and and not so much in others, but they're very big on food prepping, for example, and they kind of are pioneers of homeschooling education in a way that a lot of other people aren't. So like there's a lot of cool stuff there. I just meant there's some places in Utah with a history. But moving on, I kind of wanted to white pill for a moment. And I want to mix this white pill with a question about how you feel about another form of strategy. Which is, when we talk about the success of Libertarian Party of New Hampshire and the Free State Project, and we look at the results from a political perspective, just on the face of it, what we see is zero success, right? Which is in terms of like who has been elected that has been like a hardcore staunch libertarian in the state house and Senate, right? You have how many full-blown libertarians in like the past few years have been, state senators, for example?
So we have probably somewhere between 60 to 100 hardcore libertarians in the state house right now. We
They're all.
speaker
How many? How
the
many are LP
majority whip
members?
the majority whip. Oh, we don't give a damn about. See, here you are saying we have this strategy here in the authoritarian 49.
You didn't let me
We
finish.
don't do it
You didn't let me finish. You didn't let me finish. That's why you're upset. And that's why I said it's a white pill. Listen, let me finish. When you look at it initially on its face, what you see is a bunch of Republicans, right? But when you dig deeper, right, which is where I was going, when you dig deeper, some of the things you mentioned earlier, such as guns, homeschooling, one of the things you did mention was vaccine records and mandates. There was a snowplow bill. In the last few years especially, it seems like there have been, even if they are Republicans in name, there have been a ton of libertarian ideas in the way that the LP New Hampshire has shifted, right? We have seen, even you can call them Republicans in name, but we saw, they said we're not going to enforce gun legislation, federal gun legislation. If you want to do that, you bring in the ATF because we're not doing it. They said we're not going to take records of who is and isn't vaccinated for in terms of schooling and things like that. They expanded homeschooling rights. There's been there have been a ton of libertarian things that have been put in, even if they have an R next to their name. And so my question to you is which is where I was going to go, which obviously I kind of already have your answers. Does it matter if that this person isn't a part of the LP or the Libertarian Party if the ideas of freedom and the Overton window in your community starts to shift to such a degree that it actually starts to turn back the clock towards liberty as opposed to towards authoritarianism?
Yeah. I mean, we're the only state that's actually moving towards liberty. All the other states are moving, at various speeds. I agree. Some of you guys are moving a little bit slower, but towards greater authoritarianism. We have the most libertarians, small L libertarians, in the state house of any state, and we have. I mean, the House majority whip is an ANCAP. So I mean, we don't give a damn whether it's the Libertarian Party or not. And I know there are people who put party over liberty. We're the people who actually pick up and move for liberty. We're not picking up and moving for the Libertarian Party. We're picking up and moving for liberty. The Libertarian Party of New Hampshire is one of 100+ groups here. It's just one. It makes a lot of noise outside because it's actually seeking the most base libertarians, and I strongly recommend that if you're a base libertarian, you should hear that call and come here. But we have so many other groups that are doing so many other things, and they're all filled with liberty people, the libertarians, and not people who are just maybe they don't even identify themselves as small L libertarians. Like I said, I work with a group that is actually all Democrats, but I've changed that group's complexion. We're going for a bill that is going to be very important, I think, to a lot of people here.
Oh no, you said you've changed their complexion, and so since the media has let me know that libertarians are white supremacists, you mean that you have made that group more white, correct? That's what you mean?
Yes, that's exactly what you mean. I got into there's a group of libertarians who've moved here, and very interestingly from the LP, and they were party before liberty. They were the party before liberty people, and they are so outraged with what we're doing here. And it's like, stop! Can't you see the liberty that's moving here? But they're calling everybody's a white supremacist. I said, look, a supremacist actually has two components. First, whites are superior, okay? And they're saying, oh, this person said this, and therefore he's a white supremacist. But the other thing is that they want to rule over everyone. Nobody here wants to rule over anyone. We just want to devolve the ruling of people.
Yeah, I saw that you had an engagement with someone on Twitter that was basically saying that they were quoting someone else saying that blacks didn't have the IQ to understand libertarianism, which is an abhorrent and stupid position. And he was like, look at this white supremacist. And you were like, hey, pause. You offered no critique, which is fine, of the position, but saying that's not white supremacy to just be racist or to think that whites are superior. White supremacy as an institution, as a political doctrine, right, is one of enforcing, and I think the libertarian understands that, a belief in white supremacy without the authoritarianism is just an economically bad idea, right? Like it's just, I mean, not to get too into the weeds, but more often than not, it is just an idea that's costing you money, right? It is costing you customers for whatever product you're selling, costing you investors in whatever community you're living in. It's a net negative, I would say, in most situations. And yet there is every right for people to be racist. There's nothing inherently wrong from a libertarian perspective, from a legal ethical framework, right? About being racist and saying no blacks or no Irish need apply, or no Italians or no whatever. And in many ways, there is something, I don't want to say too valuable, but there is some value to maintaining a homogenous society. Yeah. And if you say that what I just said is horrible and evil and racist, then I want you to burn all of your anime and basically everything from Japan, because that is the most racist country in the entire fucking world, right? Like I can go to Japan right now, marry a Japanese woman, have half Japanese children, learn the language, be as Japanese as I can be for 20 years, and my children will be non-Japanese. They will not be legally Japanese. They won't even be able to write light novels. It has to be called something else because they're half white. You know what I mean? So it's like there's a give and take to this. And I think it is really important, the distinction of white supremacy requiring that authoritarian streak that simply can't exist and be libertarian. It's not possible for libertarianism to be a fascist, white supremacist political belief, because the two are diametrically opposed.
Yeah, I think I illustrated that on a tweet yesterday, and basically it was a poll. I said, here are 4 libertarians. They all have different bigotry. One is a racist, one is a misogynist, one is a homophobe, and one is a gender pronouns. Right? You must use gender pronouns. I asked the questions. I said, well, which of these? One of them is going to turn authoritarian. One of these people will turn authoritarian. And instead of just having this as their personal opinion, they're going to actually use the laws of the government to impose it on other people. Which one do you want to turn authoritarian? And it was such a great illustration to all these people, like the person who was arguing with me the other day about white supremacy. Look, a libertarian who has bad ideas is just a person with bad ideas. An authoritarian who has bad ideas is going to impose that upon you at the point of a gun. Libertarianism isn't necessarily saying that, all ideas are going to be good. I think that there's a lot of things that people will do with freedom that are just wrong, and I don't like them, and I don't want, and in a number of cases, I don't want to associate with people who do X, Y, and Z. But that's totally irrelevant for whether they should be using violence. They should not be using violence. At the very minimum, we've got to get rid of the violence. And these people who get all confused. Who get all confused about libertarianism and then certain preference sets or bigotries and this type of stuff. No, look, the first thing we have to do is stop the violence. Stop it. And then you can reform people's thinking and talk to them about, this is, higher tolerance is great. One of the things that just drives me nuts is the people who are so intolerant, the woketerians, are some of the most intolerant people. They have some of the biggest bigotry, and they go, oh, we're going to be bigotry against this bigotry. I go, look, you're not tolerant.
Hold on, pause.
Um,
I have it on good authority from the great Joe Jorgensen that it is not enough to be not racist. You must be actively anti-racist. Okay, you must be a Marxist, a race Marxist, in order to be a good person.
And I have no problem with that comment as being made outside of libertarianism. I mean, that's a totally fine comment. This is my personal preference. This is how I think that you ought to live. I think you ought to live.
No. That's a bad comment because of the history of it. I know exactly what it is. It's race Marxism. I have a problem with it. It can't be outside of libertarianism. I know what that shit is. It's privilege and power. And fuck those people.
Right. Well, I mean, the libertarianism, within libertarianism, it's a terrible comment. Because what it is saying is that these thoughts inside your head are more important than ending the violence. And I think we've got to end the violence. That's my number one goal.
Yeah.
So
for sure.
anyway, that's what we're doing in the Free State Project. We're trying to get really based libertarians here. Most people who come here don't join the LP&H. As a matter of fact, I work a lot with people who come here who are really good in politics. And I try to convince them to run in one of the two major parties. Eventually, what I'd like to see is a Free Stater Democrat going up against a Free Stater Republican, and that's the battle line. That's the battle line.
So my question. So I just out of curiosity, like these people that don't join the LP, and is it because more often? I'm just from your own anecdotal evidence. Do you think more often than not that they're like too base to give a fuck about the LP? Or is it that they're more like paleo libertarian? They're moving, for like a freedom where they have some disagreements because they're like, I believe in the Constitution and states' rights, and I want to be a part of a state that is moving towards freedom. Like, what camp do you think is more common in the free state?
So here's the problem living in an authoritarian 49, trying to imagine what's going on in the free state. Imagine, if you're in the authoritarian 49, what type of libertarian activities and groups do you have available to you? You really have kind of a libertarian party, and that's the be all end all. Now, what if you take the libertarian party and you spread it out across 100 groups? One of those groups retains the libertarian party name. Okay. But the rest of the groups are all libertarian. They're just doing other things. They're, special interest group on this, and they're working on that group. They're working on that group. So now you have 100 groups. They're all, in the authoritarian 49, they would all be LP. But we have so many libertarians doing so many different things. They're different groups. Now, in New Hampshire, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever to run as a libertarian. In my view.
Okay.
And so the people who move here who are really political, I want them to win. I want them to get into office. And the way that we get them into office is as an R and sometimes as a D.
So just a clarification, what you're saying is, kind of like how there's Young Americans for Liberty, which is kind of a paleo conservative movement, but it's not a Republican movement. But it because you're in the quote authoritarian 49, everything liberty minded kind of ends up within this small space where you have to be in the LP. But when you go to New Hampshire, if your passion is young college kids and reaching out and forming a coalition of young college kids and making college campuses more freedom loving, you don't necessarily pair up with the Libertarian Party because the Libertarian Party is trying to win elections and shit. It's like, that's not what I'm here for. I'm here to do speeches and do cool shit at the college university. And so you look at it from the outside and you're like, well, why isn't this with the LP or whatever? And it's like, the LP is just one fucking thing. This is another thing. You guys down in the 49, you're putting everything under one umbrella. We're spreading out and kind of doing what it is that we want to do because we feel a certain level of comfort and security in knowing that we can specialize here because there's enough of us to do so.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to win an election, you would join the Liberty Republicans.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And there's a good path from the Liberty Republicans to get into office. And it's a known path. Many of us have traveled it. And why would you run as a libertarian? You're not going to get into office. You're going to spend a lot of time and effort, whereas you spend that same amount of time and effort, you will get into office and you'll actually be changing laws. We don't care what letter is after your name. We only care whether you're advancing liberty. Now, if you're really into gun rights, well, you're going to join a gun group. Now,
Right.
Why isn't that part of the Libertarian Party? Because they're focused on guns, and there's enough of us who are focused on that's what they're doing. If you're really interested in crypto, you're going to be joining a crypto group. If you're really interested in social things, you're going to be joining one of our many social groups. So we just have so many different groups doing so many different things. I really dislike it when we have a really good candidate come here from one of the authoritarian 49s, and he
try and
thinks
run as a
I have to
libertarian.
run as a libertarian. And I
Yeah.
go, stop it. Why? I want to get you into office. I want you to actually win and change laws, because
And it's very interesting. It's that strategy of like, what's best for us in our community versus like, what is this national strategy? Because, to the outsider, you look at that and you go, well, if you have so much support, why are you not pushing the Libertarian Party and push? It's like, I care, but like, it sucks. But like, why the fuck do you live in Oklahoma? Like, move to New Hampshire where we're doing liberty things. And while we're here doing liberty things, I don't give a fuck about the party system. I give a fuck about doing liberty things in New Hampshire. And so there's a very different mindset there than the kind of the more long-term outside strategy, I guess.
Yeah. So, I mean, the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire has evolved into doing what it does because we have so many other groups doing other things. Now, you look at the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire members, they're all part of these other different groups. So you have these different circles and circles and circles.
Right.
But we have a lot of people who are, they don't want to be associated with the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire because we're signaling so hard that they don't want their colleagues.
Hippies. It's like, dude, I'm a libertarian. I'm a hippie. I just came here to be free, like not fucking read Twitter rants about the Jews. It's like, all right. I get that. I could see that,
Are you at least going to say that we're, so, my favorite one about the Jews was there is a Jewish conspiracy, and here are the 4 leaders. And it was a picture of Rothbard, Rand, Hayek.
Well, okay. There's way more than that. It's basically everybody but Hans Hermann Hoppe. Hans Hermann Hoppe is basically the only non-Jewish. I mean, you have both Friedmans. You have both Friedmans. You got Hayek. You got Mises. You got Spike Cohen. If you want to look at people today, or Walter Block, or Kinsella, like most of the libertarian thought leaders. Gene Epstein. There you go. Right. Most of them. But yeah. So I apologize. I forget that I'm not just talking to libertarians that know that it's bump. Right. So let me be very clear. Libertarianism, to any hardcore right winger, let me let you know right now, we're a fucking Jewish movement, my guy. All right? Like, we're not an anti-Semitic movement. We're a fucking Jewish movement. And yes, the LPNH says spicy things to get attention and piss people off, and then explain that, like, I don't know what to tell you, man. Ashkenazi Jews have a higher average IQ, and they have a family that, like, teaches critical thinking skills. And you combine those two things together, and, like, the people that are really into economics tend to be Jews. That's just how that works.
Well, we got blasted for that particular tweet, so much so that we repeat that tweet quite often. And
I would if I had a Twitter account.
All these outraged. See, they're all Nazis. Look, they're complaining about a Jewish conspiracy, and it's like all of our leaders, and we're just like going, Now the people we're really interested in. That's the screaming. Right? The screaming masses.
Mm-hmm.
The people we're interested in is that small sliver, 1%, less than 1%. They see that and they go, oh, Jesus, these guys know what the hell they're talking about. They have everyone else just going and doing their rote little puppet
Or at the
manipulations
very
and
least,
screaming.
I think at the very least, the type of people that ask questions, right? Because if they're asking a question, then they're susceptible. If they're going, okay, I'm seeing everybody screaming.
We're not into conversion. That's not what we do. You know, I've done conversion.
Well, then there's what's the point?
Scott, I've done conversion for 40 years. I'm done with it.
Okay, fair enough.
Actually, that's not true. You know, I actually do a service here in the Free State. I convert the spouses who come.
Okay, listen to me.
Because a lot of times, you know, you'll get a couple, and there will be one person of that couple who is very interested. You know, oh, thank God, I'm finally here. You know, and the other one's going, okay, what's happening here? You know, will I have any network? And of course, we have like these fantastic social networks. We have parenting networks. We have children networks. We have, you know, all these different networks that we're laying in.
Right.
You know, even now building up. So they start feeling comfortable, but they go, okay, so tell me again, what is it that you guys believe? And so I'll actually take them aside. I'll go, well, okay, do you own your own body? You know, does someone have a superior ownership of your body? You know, do you believe, you know, and I'll actually walk them through, and they'll go, oh, that's what my spouse has been saying all this time.
Yeah, well, their spouse was probably bad at communicating it, which is
no.
That's pretty common amongst libertarians in general.
No. You totally misunderstand. The reason why they didn't do it was because they were scared of the social ostracization.
Maybe.
Then they moved to the Free State, where the social is actually supportive, and all of a sudden they're going, okay, well, maybe now I can actually listen, because I was so much in fear before. I couldn't listen. Now, all of a sudden, they can listen, and now they go, oh, well, that makes total sense. Yeah, I guess I am libertarian, you know, but they didn't have the qualities to be able to convert in the authoritarian 49 because they were surrounded by those cannibals.
Okay, so I understand. So there's a few arguments that you're making here, and I think I disagree a little bit, but I also kind of see where you're coming from, right? And the argument that you're happening is, well, I'm not concerned with conversion at all, which is a weird argument, because if every libertarian in the world moves to New Hampshire and it's impossible to convert anybody else, then it's kind of a moot point, because eventually we're just going to be bombed out of existence. So we're getting all in one nice place to get bombed by the authoritarians. So we have to have some interest in conversion, right? There has to be some, even if it's a slow conversion that occurs over time, you know. And I wrote this question down. I think what I write, you know, how do we fight for libertarianism philosophically from the enclave? Because I do understand when you say, maybe you can clarify, because if what you mean by it, I'm not interested in conversion, if what you really mean is, I only have so much time on this planet, I only have so much energy, and I want to put my time and my energy into something that can make a meaningful impact and difference right here, right now, that gets us further towards a more peaceful world. And the way that I do that now is coalescing libertarians here so that we can be an enclave. Then I completely understand what you're saying and completely agree with you. But conversion has to be a part of a long-term strategy of libertarianism. Or we leave a predominantly unfree world of warmongers at our gates. Like we have barbarians at the gates, and I hope we don't have to kill them all. You know what I mean? Like, I would hope that we could convert the barbarians at the gates, as Rome did to toga-wearing Gauls, right? And then eventually toga-wearing Gauls can become Romans. And we recognize that there are the Germans that will never be converted, and you know, one day we might have to do something. That's how the Romans viewed, you know, the Gaelic people, you know. So like, is that kind of maybe more in line with what you understand where I'm coming from?
Yeah, I think that's a little bit. I mean, you know, so for example, you're not moving, Scott. Now, the best thing that you could do, in my view, is to actually uncover libertarians. And I would like you to actually focus on people who can actually become libertarian, or who actually have the characteristics to understand this and explore, and then send them to the Free State.
I've done this.
At some point, At some point, you can actually say, okay, when I talk about liberty, that's what I'm talking about.
Hold on, listen,
Right?
listen. There is an individual who will remain nameless, right? Who discovered me, and he was a libertarian, and I fought and fought and fought and fought to get him out of Florida into New Hampshire, and it looks like he'll probably be moving there soon. Hardcore libertarian and former lived under communism in Cuba,
No.
and very close to anarcho. Wait, I think he still calls himself an ANCAP, but he doesn't believe in argumentation ethics. So he's just a bad ANCAP. But nevertheless, I think he's looking to move as soon as he can. And I've been trying to do that with other people. Like I said, I have 2 children here. I'm going wherever they go. Wherever they go, I'm going. Period.
Well, especially the libertarians who are feeling despondent, who are despairing. Please tell them that there is hope. There is hope of actually having now it's not going to be the whole world. We can't do the whole world because we're a very teeny tiny little group and most of the people are unconvincible, but they can actually help create something. And you guys can then start pointing to it. And you go, well, New Hampshire has it. And everyone will say, well, yeah, but they're those crazy libertarians.
But I've already started that. You guys have already done that to a degree. And that's why I wanted to do that white pill segment I talked about earlier, which is, you can look at it from the outside and see a bunch of Republicans, right? But when you look at the actual legislation and you look at what has changed in New Hampshire is literally the only state that is curtailing gun laws, that is curtailing mandates, that was opening up homeschooling opportunities. That when I looked at the legislation that was coming forward, my first thought, God's honest, when I looked at the 2022 legislation that was going before the governor to be signed, was you guys had specific gun laws with snowmobiles? Like that was actually the first thing I thought. I was like, that was a thing. Jesus, there's so many dumb laws on the books everywhere.
Oh yeah.
And my second thought was, that's awesome. That's base. That I don't give a fuck what letter you have next to your name. If you're pushing liberty and you're going in that direction, that's the right direction to be going.
Yeah, well, I mean, we basically got rid of all of the gun laws, and then there was this little stupid law that you couldn't take a gun on a snowmobile, and so we got rid of that one. And
Yeah.
but there's, we have had so many decades and centuries of adding laws,
Mhm.
adding laws, and it just takes time and effort and energy to repeal those back. And I have to tell you, that's something that's done by the political group. We have way more groups than just the political group. The political group, though, is very, very important. Every time that I meet one of the guys, he says, "Oh, I'm going to run for," I take out my wallet, I give them $20 so they don't have to announce. I go, "Okay, now you can't take it back. You have to run." but there's a clear path on how to do this. And God bless them. I'm so happy that they're doing it. But all of our groups are important. LPNH is important, but it's just one of 100 something groups. What LPNH is doing is it's signaling to we don't want to be cold Texas.
God damn it, Dennis Pratt. If there is one thing that the audience will take from this, it is that LPNH is just one group and they are not the FSP. We have said that so many times. And I agree with you. Thank you for that clarification. It's an important one for sure. So just a small little question. How do you feel about your competition? And when I say your competition, I think there's one thing that really rings true, at least for the wealthier people, which is Prospera in Honduras. When you look at Prospera dropped a toothpick on the ground. I've been quitting vaping, and so it's been a lot. How do you view Prospera? I'm sure you're aware. For the audience that may or may not be aware, Honduras, along with several other South American countries, basically came to an agreement with the United Nations, and they created this legislation and rule system known as ZEDES, where foreign investment was essentially allowed to buy land and govern themselves in every way but felony criminal charges. And so because of this, Prospera came in, bought up a couple kilometers of land, and during COVID bought up a lot more, and have been moving in biotech firms and other people, as well as hardcore voluntarists and anarcho-capitalists that move here, where you can basically choose your own legal system by choosing a rights enforcement agency, your own insurance practices, etc. And so I am curious, because when I talk about like this idea of moving somewhere, there is a lot of people that it's like there's these two options, right? There's Prospera, which is almost the more hardcore and more dangerous and riskier option. And then there's the Free State Project. And it's like doing one over the other kind of is a competition. Like, we need to coalesce, right? And so we can't all coalesce in both places. The more places we try and coalesce to, the less effective we are. And so I was curious what your your position is with Prospera. How do you feel about it? Do you wish him luck? Like, how do you feel?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I believe, there's, I don't know, 7, 8 different major strategies that libertarians have been trying to use to create a liberty society, or to insulate themselves from authoritarianism. And I believe that the concentration strategy is the correct strategy, the one that's going to get us the fastest. Prospera, I don't really know that much about Prospera. I know that there was a change in the legislature, and that they, a more authoritarian group came in, and they
socialists. So the new socialist president,
yeah, they
is
basically
doing everything they can to amend the
negated some of the laws that had allowed Prospera. Prospera is trying to work around those things, and I'm okay. So, one of the questions I suggest that we talk about is, why is this taking so long? Why is it? What people will say, well, you don't have a free state, you don't have X law, and I'm going, first of all, this is a project, we're all working on this, but
right.
Secondly, we're pushing back on hundreds of years of laws, and it's a long process, it's a hard process. We don't really know what's happening, but one of the biggest things is that it's hard to move. It's hard to get people to pick up and move. You talked a little bit about your family life. People say, I'm comfortable with where I live, or it doesn't seem that bad, and then the next COVID lockdown happens, and they go, oh, maybe it is that bad. And then they come back out and go, oh, it doesn't seem that bad. No, it is that bad. But
many people are eternally present in their political thinking. It is extremely right. It's like this family, the Biden family is the most corrupt political family that's ever been. Fuck them Democrats, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, and it's just like whatever the thing is currently happening is magically the most important, the biggest deal. And representative of their entire political lives. And it's, it's very much how midwits and idiots engage in politics, unfortunately.
Yep. So, one of the big things though here, Scott, is that we move individually. So, for example, the Mormons might move by families, or might move by village, even, maintaining their family relationships, their friend relationships, neighbor relationship, work relationships, etc. Libertarianism is one of these things that crops up so randomly. Is your family all libertarian, Scott?
No, not at all. My mother is. So I started off as a socialist. Following in line kind of with my mother. She had me on like the Clinton campaign trail as a baby. And like watching Bill Maher. But it was certainly liberal, right? And so my mother has moved more towards the center as the left has become illiberal, right? So I certainly had some liberal policy, and I went further left and then kind of ended up back at libertarianism, minarchism, and eventually, honestly, Robert Murphy's chaos theory is what broke me. It was the last straw. I was like, I think we need a state for court system, et cetera. And I read the chaos theory and I was like, okay, we fucking don't. Like, even if I don't agree with everything here, we clearly don't need the government. This is a much better proposed situation than anything the state has ever done. Like, all right. But yeah. And so, so no, my family is either kind of I don't know. There's a libertarian bent to my family because my mother's side of the family are Appalachians, and I don't have a lot of connection with them, but they're outlaws. A lot of them, a lot of heroin problems, a lot of ginseng people, like a lot of. It's a different kind of politics. Appalachian people, but I don't know.
What about your neighbors? You have a lot of libertarians in your neighborhood?
I live in Richmond right now. No, there's no fucking libertarians in my neighborhood.
Right. So for you to move, let's say that you didn't have the child care thing, you would have to actually pretty much move by yourself. And and now you're thinking, well, what type of network do I have? Will I have friends? Will I have social situations? Will I be able to find a job? Et cetera, et cetera. So that whole thing of migration for some sort of greater value for libertarians is actually one of the hardest ones, because we're moving individually. We're not moving in units as a group. So one of the things that I wonder is, I mean, I think that there's a lot of scenarios in which New Hampshire actually comes out extraordinarily well, and might actually be the winner. But if it doesn't, and there's another place or another way or another thing, it's going to require libertarians. And we've already aggregated. We're already here. And we have the most base libertarians. And so, for example, there's the New Province Project, which is trying to model itself on the Free State Project. And it's up in New Brunswick. It's a free province project in New Brunswick. And so if America and DC just goes absolutely insane and somehow Canada looks better, we can pick up and move to New Brunswick. And we have all of our infrastructure, we have all of our connections, we have all of our networks, and we can actually come now because we're actually a group. Before we were never a group. We were all isolated and independent and naked. And now we actually have that army. And so now we can go, and if Prospera goes, which, I don't really care where, to tell you the truth. I just want a free society. That is something that I have dreamed of for decades and decades. I despaired that it was ever possible. And I see it forming here in New Hampshire. I'm so excited. But, if it forms in New Hampshire and something happens, well, okay. But we have all these connections and we have all this knowledge and we have all this, let's pick up and go, and now all of a sudden you have a diaspora, right?
So what you're saying is, if I could Kathy Newman you for a moment. So what you're saying is, and then completely take you out of context. No,
is that you like white supremacy and anti-Jewish.
Right. So, but I think what you're saying is that there is a even if libertarians are very disparate in many of their beliefs, there is a cohesion behind that political philosophy, even if it's not the strongest, because libertarians do tend to be very individualistic. Nevertheless, moving to New Hampshire is really difficult because you're isolated the way you are. You don't have a network. You don't have a job. You don't have anything. But if more and more libertarians begin to coalesce, and there's more and more networking, and there's more of a community aspect around these shared values, heaven forbid, whatever crystal ball scenario we imagine that occurs in the United States that attempts to force these people out of New Hampshire, it's these people now. It's not you. It's not Tommy. It's not Tommy and Sarah, the family that's trying to shut the fuck up and keep quiet about their political opinions in a new world where neighbors are telling on neighbors for not being commissars, right? Instead, it's a group of people that are like, hey, we all have to move, and your job is like, hey, did you get the memo? We're moving to this new spot in Canada. Okay? Your job's waiting for you in Canada, but it's not here in New Hampshire because they're pushing us out. Hey, your neighbor is the libertarians moving. And then all of a sudden it becomes, like you said, a diaspora. So even if there is an unfortunate circumstance where, the national divorce doesn't quite go the way everyone hopes it goes, if they hope that it occurs at all, there is a strength in numbers even in the movement of people.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I said, I think that in a lot of the scenarios, I mean, people play all these games about what if this, what if that. Having this base group of the most base libertarians. I was talking to a collapsitarian, and he goes, "Oh, freedom isn't possible until the whole society collapses." I go, "Okay, it collapses. That's great. That's great." And then now, as it starts reforming, who's around you? It's a bunch of authoritarians. And what are the authoritarians going to say? Well, the problem is we weren't authoritarian enough. Now, if you come out of a collapse and it's a bunch of libertarians, our answers are going to be quite different. First of all, you're going to survive the collapse a lot better. And secondly, the way that you're going to come out is you're going to come out even more free. Because the first thing is you need is libertarians. You're not going to get it in the authoritarian 49 surrounded by authoritarians.
So I have one more thing. We've done a lot of white pill. We've done a lot of like positive kind of ideas, right? It's time for the black pill portion of this interview. So I want to start with your reaction to a Wocal Distance tweet that went out recently. He was responding to Wocal Distance quote tweeted someone saying balkanize. That was the whole. It was balkanize, and then there was a picture of I want to say it was from NPR saying that like red people are moving to red states and blue people are moving to blue states. And he says, quote, balkanize and build, end quote, is just a fancy way of saying, quote, cede enormous amounts of strategically valuable land, capital, and resources to people who want to destroy you, end quote. This is a disastrous idea. That was my response too. How do you respond?
I mean, the arrogance of this. That first of all, we own it. First of all, libertarians don't own a damn thing. We're actually owning New Hampshire. We're actually. This is the first time that libertarians, as a group, has actually owned something. But this whole idea. Well, I never let the South go because that land is really valuable. I mean, it's not your land. What are you talking about? If you want the land, go buy it. I talking to authoritarians about national divorce and secession is just so crazy because they have all these assumptions. It's our land and it's not your land. It's whoever's land it is. I would like to actually see some sort of panarchy. Where
Thousand Liechtensteins.
Well, that would be kind of a voluntarist thing. A panarchist, though, it's like in the old days, your country was either Catholic, and then they'd have a big war, and then now it was Protestant, and we kill all the Catholics, and you have another big war, and now it was some other sect of Protestantism, and you kill all the other. Now we actually have people living next to each other with different religions. Why can't we live with each other with different governances? You want to be ruled by Hillary, you go ahead and sign up and have Hillary service govern your life. God bless you. Thank you very much. I will live by my own, or I'll pick Ron Paul as a service provider.
That's kind of why I was bringing up Prospera as kind of like the high risk, high reward version of concentrationism. In the sense is like they're doing that because they kind of got to do things from the ground up. Of course, they also might get invaded by a Honduras military because some commie decides they want to do that, right? So it's a kind of a high risk, high reward situation is the way that I see it. But yeah, that's kind of the end goal, I think, right? Which is that when you show up there, they say, well, here's the insurance plans that companies are offering based upon what rules you're going to follow, so that you can be covered, in case you trespass or aggress upon another person, either intentionally or unintentionally. We'll look into you and we'll give you a quote, and different companies give you different quotes. And some companies are like, well, if you don't smoke and you don't do this and you don't do that, it'll be cheaper because you promise not to do any of these things. Right. And I think that's perfectly reasonable. And so, yeah, I do think a panarchy is kind of a preferential, one of many preferential systems. I do want to see covenant communities as well. But
Well,
going back,
Scott,
go
I
ahead.
want to ask you, because you said that we have to actually. You didn't say this, but I
Implied it maybe.
inferred what you said to mean that we have to actually convert everybody to libertarianism. I mean, do
No,
you believe that's possible, or do you see like the future, going out of a century or something like that would be
I think there's
where
a
we actually have authoritarian systems all over the place, different types of authoritarian systems, but we could have one libertarian society.
so what I would say is that our immediate neighbors, at the very least, need to have some libertine ideals as a burgeoning new nation state. Even if we're not a state and it's a purely voluntaristic community, the rest of the authoritarian world is going to see us as a nation state, right? And so, as we are to the rest of the world, outsiders looking in, a nation state, the immediate neighbors need to at the very least have some understanding of our ideas, and their community needs to be made up of enough people that are at least empathetic to the system, a certain critical mass, to where we're not in a constant, ever-present threat of invasion. So that would be number one thing. The number two thing is I did a video on my YouTube. It's a little bit old now, and so my theory is a little bit dated because I am a baby ANCAP, in that I was a libertarian, a year and a half ago. And, well, I'm a minarchist libertarian. I wouldn't even call that a libertarian now, but that's beside the point. I don't want to gatekeep. I think there is something to economic entanglement, which is, kind of that idea, that idea of, when goods trade cross borders, troops don't. But of course, we've seen with enough government corruption, such as in the Ukraine situation, goods can cross borders and troops can still cross them too. And so, that is not enough. It's not enough just to be trading partners. It's not enough. We need a certain level of power. And any authoritarian nation that is our neighbor, that is authoritarian enough in nature, would be unwise to allow us to gain enough power to defend ourselves, right? At least in the short term, if their goals are the authoritarian goals. And so I do think that there needs to be some level of conversion. Ultimately, I hope that, you said earlier in this podcast, and I agree, that when talking to the statists, more often than not, their brain philosophically is consequentialist, right? They don't understand an ethical legal framework that doesn't offer prescriptions, only descriptions, right? Which is totally foreign to almost any moral system, because libertarianism is half a moral system. It doesn't tell you what you ought do, only what you ought not do, maybe. And so these consequentialists, they need to see empiricism, despite the fact that libertarians are Austrians that are methodological individualists, right? We don't believe in that kind of empirical nonsense in terms of economics and things. But they need to see the results. And so I think part of the conversion is also we need our own society that does so well that people start to realize, oh, there's something good about this. There's something working about this. So yeah. I don't know that. Hopefully, I answered your question. It's difficult for me to give you a perfect answer. Yeah. So the TLDR, we need a certain critical mass of the world to be libertarian enough for us not to get bombed out of existence.
Yeah, I mean that's certainly a concern. I mean, we have ideas around that. But I mean, I that's true of any small state. How do you actually become, safe, with other states that are larger than you and maybe antagonistic? You mentioned the Ukraine, but of course, Ukraine and Russia. I mean, the whole Donbass region, right? You had a Donbass region that really wanted to secede from Ukraine, right? and the Ukraine said, "Oh no, we're going to kill you." And Russia, and that was like kind of this low-level 10-year battle going on that everyone totally ignores. And now we're talking about freedom for the Ukrainian, but would a New Hampshire do that? It's just not so many of the conflicts happen because you have authoritarian versus authoritarian. Anyway, I don't
Yeah, I
want to get
mean,
into I
Ukraine
don't want
is
to get into crystal balls, but
yeah. I would say that Ukraine is been, to be as fair as I can without getting too deep into it. Anyone that is a good faith debater, no matter where you fall in that whole debate, will recognize that Ukraine was indeed one of the most corrupt nations in the world in terms of like measuring corruption in governments. And there's a lot of problems, and there's a lot of history, and there's a lot of complications. And so it's a messy thing to talk about. And as far as New Hampshire goes, will New Hampshire have those same problems? I doubt it. Even if they do, there's a wonderful Robert Higgs quote that I'm probably butchering, but I'll paraphrase so that it's to not say it's a quote. And he basically says, you know, if my house is on fire, I don't refuse to put the fire out because at some point in the future, the house might catch on fire again. In fact, it's probably obvious that a house at some point is going to catch on fire again. Like that is the natural state. Given enough time, fires occur all the time. And so you should approach the government the same way. It's like, well, won't it just become corrupt again? It's like, yeah, but your default is to accept the corruption. It's like the default is accepting your house is on fire. No, put the fucking fire out and then try and prevent your house from burning down in the future. But there's no guarantee that doesn't happen again.
Yeah, my area of research is the design of new products in emerging industries. So that was my formal training, and that was my that was my area of research. And so much of what we are doing now has to do with building a prototype. Libertarianism has been in this mode of, well, we're gonna show you the concept page. We're going to tell you, and we'll draw this example or that example, and now we want everybody to buy this concept, sight unseen, and implement it. Whereas that's just not how diffusion occurs. Diffusion of new products occurs. What you have to do is you actually build a prototype, demonstrate it, have a couple people buy into it, that type of thing. And that's all we're doing here with New Hampshire. New Hampshire is our libertarian prototype. It's our way of actually showing the world that you do not have to be enslaved by rulers. And are there an infinite number of libertarian societies? Yes, there are. We get really upset when people say, "Oh, you just want a libertarian utopia." No, we don't know what authoritarianism is a utopian idea. Libertarianism is, whatever society is going to be, it's going to be different if Scott's here versus Scott's not here, right? Because Scott is actually a human actor here, and the society that we build is going to be bottom up.
I mean, once you add covenant communities into it, you start getting, to I want to see covenant communities. And the reason I want to see covenant communities more than I want to see libertarian societies is because of the very thing that we talked about in terms of conversion, right? Where we have different goals, and that's okay because I think we're both libertarians and we both believe in it deeply. I want to see some covenant communities, and I want examples of covenant communities working so that when people come to me and they go, well, you need this for this and you need that for that, you need this for that, I want two examples to say, well, number one, you don't need any of that shit. Here's a society that does it without it. And then number two, if you want all of that, here's a successful society that does that. It's called a covenant community. And when you move there, you sign a fucking contract saying these are the rules you're going to follow if you want to buy property here. And if you don't, they tell you to fucking kick rocks, right? Because this is a trad-con Catholic community that follows these rules and does these things, and so it is, I want to see those examples. And it is one of those things, because I do a lot of debating. I'm sure if you've been following me, I debate a lot against lefties, and it's always difficult to figure out how and what to debate because I'm really debating for the audience's sake. I'm not really debating for the person I'm debating because I know they're hard-headed, and even if I was 100% right and they knew it, they would still pretend I was wrong. And so like one of the things that becomes a problem is like, well, where's your example? And it's like, Republic of Kospaya from 1440 to 18. 26 or or it's like um you know oh god, why can I not think? Chiron, Mexico, is and that's not libertarian for the very reason you pointed out earlier, because there's no libertarians there. um it's just anarcho-mutualists and indigenismo and stuff. But yeah, so I don't know. I think what New Hampshire's doing is really important. I think that everyone should follow Dennis Pratt on whatever social media platform you're on. I think if you are a young man or a young woman that doesn't have super strong ties to where you live and you're a libertarian, then you have no fucking excuses to not pack your bags and go to New Hampshire. I understand some people have strong ties to where they're at, or they can't, like, they have a career that makes it almost impossible. That's unfortunate. I don't know what the risk analysis is for you as a person. But if you're a 21-year-old libertarian who, works, is going to school, or like works for, $17 an hour at the fucking supply store or something, shut the fuck up and get your ass to New Hampshire. Like, stop making excuses. Tell your parents you love them deeply and fucking go online and find a fucking job. Start talking to some people and go into the Free State Project's Discord server. Start making connections with people that already live there.
Yeah, I'd add to that. I think the retired folks, people who have actually made their money, and that this is something that's important to them. Why aren't you out here? I mean,
because it's cold.
What's
the fuck, man?
Why
are you trying to kill grandma?
What's a better use of your time and energy that you have remaining than to leave a gift of the world of abolitionism, or if you're actually a young couple, right, and you want to have a child. Are you really going to raise that child in an authoritarian system? First of all, that they're going to pick up from the authoritarianism from all their classmates and the schools,
or just
even if you
theory.
homeschool. Even if you homeschool, you're not going to be homeschooling amongst libertarians. But you move here, and all of a sudden, you have these libertarian cells and libertarian groups and libertarian parents and libertarian friends, and now they're actually growing up in a liberty mindset. So I think that there's actually a lot of segments for whom this is really important. It's important for your family. It's important for your friendships. It's important for your jobs. And do you want to build up an authoritarian system, or do you want to build up a libertarian system? Because this is the libertarian system to build up. Scott, you talked a little bit about covenant communities. It's actually happening here. It's so interesting to watch, where we have enough groups, right? I talked about the different groups. Well, a lot of these groups actually don't like each other.
No, libertarians having a hard time getting along.
That's why that's one of the reasons I get such a kick out of people conflating LPNH with Free State Projects. It's like, well, that's just one group, and there are a lot of groups that are very liberty oriented that don't like LPNH, so what? But what we're seeing is actually some sort of siloing that's going on, where this group is like going, boy, we're like this, and we don't like those people, but we have these values, and we're going to maintain. And so you're actually seeing a larger groups of libertarians getting together and forming communities around shared values. Because I agree with you, libertarianism is extraordinarily thin. It's not a full philosophy of life. It's a codicil. As long as the other person consents, right? So you can believe the golden rule, do unto others as they would do unto you, as long as they consent. You could be you could be Jewish or Catholic or a Protestant, as long as they consent. So it's just a codicil that you can attach to anything. Well, what are you attaching to? So what we're seeing here in New Hampshire is those groups are actually building up. They're all sharing that codicil, right? So they all share that codicil, but yet they're different. And so you come in here, and I had to go through 3 groups before I said, oh, now I found my group. And still, that's a process, and one of the things I do is I actually create other groups. So, I'm creating new groups now that are a little bit off. I'm creating kind of a humanistic high tolerance group. Because we have kind of a more Hoppian group that's very on the ascent, and they're oh, you have to have these conservative values, and and it's like, okay, you can do that. Well, what
I'm
about
pretty
this other group?
Hoppian. I'm pretty Hoppian, but I'm also not conservative in the way that like most Hoppians are, if that makes sense. Like
Mm.
I'm weird like that. People are like, they're like, I'm pretty Hoppian. They're like, oh, so how do you feel about black people? And I'm like, what? No, like I just agree with him on like immigration policy and like on this, and like I'm a believer of AE. Like they're like, oh,
Yeah, I
okay,
mean,
okay, okay.
yeah.
Okay, but really though, like, what do you really think? I'm like, no, I don't feel that way at all.
And I shouldn't
Did
say
you
that.
have it?
I shouldn't say Hoppian to take one small part of something that he said, which was really more normative than philosophical, right? It was like, oh, I think that this will be the one that wins, right? As opposed to some of his big ideas. And I
Well,
didn't mean to do that.
I think Hop. Here's the issue with Hoppa. Hoppa is a fucking genius that everyone with a very small, with almost everyone that says they're Hoppian or have read Hoppa are lying, and they read excerpts from Democracy, the God That Failed, and then they call themselves Hoppian, and then they promulgate ideas that is just like hardcore conservatism with a sprinkling of libertarian words. And then they're like, I'm a Hoppian. And it's like, no, you're not. Like, Hoppa's not like, it's like, dude, you're a monarchist fascist. Like, the fuck are you talking about? Like, Hoppa hates you. Like, no. Like, so before we, I think it's a great conversation. I love the talk about it. Did you have anything else that you wanted to ask me, or anything that you were curious about my opinion on? I know you're the great Dennis Pratt. I'm just a dude.
um no, I understand that not everyone can move, and I think that the Free State Project is really for a particular type of person, somebody who's really super driven, and has priorities that are really aligned to liberty. That's just been me for so many years that it's hard for me to kind of accept. We have people here who they just discount all the libertarians who won't move to the New Hampshire as LARPers, and I understand that perspective, but I'm all
I'll
for
be honest.
you.
Listen,
I'm all for you sacrificing your life, finding more libertarians who will actually move here.
Listen. Here's my deal. Here's my deal. Libertarianism is very important to me, and to anybody that wants to discount my opinion on that shit, spending time with my kids is more important. Period. I'm selfish like that. You know why?
Yeah, well,
because I have some objectivist leanings, all right? And what is in the rational self-interest of me is not to move out, abandon my fucking kids so I can like be a part of a community, so I can be a depressed deadbeat dad. Like, maybe in 15 years when they're older and like they're ready to go off to college and shit, I won't have anything tethering me here. But until then, like in the morning, I'm also, you know what? To anyone that is a detractor, also, I'm picking up my autistic son at noon to take him to his babysitter from his like therapist appointment in the morning. Like, I got to be around here for my kid. Like, then that's just how that rolls. Period.
Well, what I'd like you to do is come out and visit us. DM me. I'll put you up.
I definitely got to come to the next Pork Fest. Mostly because I heard that there are people running naked, and I'm ready.
People come for the big Pork Fest for sure. We have a lot of visitors come for that. But I think that there's something to be said to come just for a week. You go to Amish country, you go to this, you go to that group. Come to libertarian country and actually experience it. We'll put you up at the Independence Inn. DM me, I'll give you a good deal. Give you tours, loops, and you can go visit this community up here. Then you can go visit that community out there. You can go visit this community, and you can you go for a shoot. You could do crypto meetup. You can do all these different things with all these different groups, and I think it will change your perspective on the viability of libertarianism. I think it will give you. You talked a little bit about a white pill. I think you'll go, oh my God, this is incredible what's going on here. I never I may have talked about it, but I never really thought it could be real.
Can I say
And
something
so
that's
I
going to make you
invite
really
you to
angry?
come out and visit us. Take a
Can I?
week, visit us, DM me.
Can I will. I will. When I have, money. But I'm going to say something that's going to upset everyone from New Hampshire and Free State Project. I really do want to come and check it out. But also, while I'm up there, I kind of want to see Massachusetts. I want to check out cool historical shit in Massachusetts too. Sorry. I would.
I mean,
that'd be part of the draw. Would be to like check out like Salem and like shit like that. It would be cool. I think a lot of history there. Is all I'm saying.
Sure. I mean, I
will for sure. At some point,
I've gotten to the point, Scott, where I actually don't feel comfortable crossing the border. I have to actually psychologically prepare to cross the border. My wife, told me about this Indian food restaurant that opened up, and we're gonna go check it out and stuff. And we're driving, and I go, honey, we're going into Maine. And she goes, oh yeah, no, it's right over the border. I go, you didn't tell me we're. I mean, for me, I never thought of borders as mattering. To me, when I lived in New York City and I would drive down to Jersey, it didn't really matter.
Borders are arbitrary, but they show who lives in those borders and the laws that are in those borders and the culture in those borders. All those things matter. The border itself doesn't really.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you have
made manifest by that.
You have number 1 in Freedom, New Hampshire, right next to number 34 in Massachusetts, 36 Maine, 47 Vermont, New York, which is number 50. That's what 2.5 hour, 3 hour drive. So you can go to any authoritarian state that you want. And I would actually recommend that if you move to New Hampshire, you do it.
Are you talking about their index?
At some point, you're not going to want to move down there.
What are those numbers? Hold on, those numbers you're referencing. Are you talking about like more authoritarian? I'm
referencing the freedom in the 50 states.
Okay.
They've done that for some 20 some years, and they rate the different states in terms of.
That's what I thought you were talking about, but you just started saying numbers with the states. I was like, what the fuck is he talking about?
Yeah,
I got it. We're good.
We pay attention to things like that.
I was stationed in New York. I remember when
New York State. You mean like West Point?
Well, no, like Fort Drum. I was at Fort Drum. And I remember it was such a culture shock for me because like I'm from Virginia, and Virginia is a very military heavy and authoritarian state, right? There's a lot of bullshit and dumb laws or whatever. And it's weirdly enough the kind of libertarian, but it isn't. And the reason it's hard to tell if you don't live here is because all of the metrics and things that you see are from the major cities and from Northern Virginia, where every government employee in America lives. And then when you go out into the country in this area, it's everyone hates DC deeply. Like there's a hatred for Washington here that like I haven't seen in most other places.
It's Nova versus Reva. Is that it?
Yeah,
Nova, which is North Virginia versus Reva, rest of Virginia.
Nobody really uses Reva. Like, I mean, everyone just says Nova, like Northern Virginia, and then they'll say everybody else in the DMV or whatever. Yeah, but it's wild. It's wild. When I did the census here, and I learned a lot about the culture, and it was like, oh, you get out into the country, and these folk do not fuck with government employees. Let me tell you, I've had firearms pulled on me multiple times when I was doing work for the census. No, what I was saying is I remember when I was in upstate New York, I got there and it was just like paying taxes on fucking recycling. And like, there was so many things I was just like, until I lived there, I was like, how the fuck do people live like this? This is strangling. Like, this feels like I can almost feel the government in the room with me. You know what I mean? Like, show us on the doll where the government touched you. It's like right here, dude. Like I can feel it like on my neck, like strangling me. So I could totally understand how living in a place that's even freer than where I am. And then like moving into like New York or something and just being like, Okay. You know what I mean? We didn't bring any handguns, did we? Because we will go to jail now all of a sudden because we wanted to go to a
Yeah.
fucking Indian restaurant. Thanks, Carol. You know,
Yeah. Well, we have to be concerned about a cartridge in the back of the car if you dip down into Massachusetts for the 4 miles that 495 makes into it,
Mm.
because that's a felony. Here you have your whole car filled with the cartridges. We don't give a damn.
I don't care. I've got it too, motherfucker. Like, go ahead, spray, see what happens. Well, it seems like this conversation's coming to a bit of a close, and I had a great conversation. Right at 2 hours and 15 minutes, maybe give or take a few. Man, I'm so glad I was able to speak with you. You're someone I've wanted to speak with for a while.
Well, please come out and visit us.
I will. I promise. I promise.
You'll have a great time. You can meet the Lakes people. You can meet the Moose Mountain people. You'll meet the Seacoast people. You can meet all the Southern people.
At some point in time, I swear I will come out to New Hampshire. All right. Hand on the Bible.
Oh, that's the Bible that you're swearing on. Gotcha.
It's my NIV. Yeah. At some point, I will come out and visit New Hampshire.
Well, bring your family. Take the kids, and there's
you do not know my ex.
Massachusetts
that is not happening.
Oh, really?
My ex is not letting me take my kids out of state for some New Hampshire. There's no way.
Oh,
that'd be way too much of an argument.
Sorry.
It's okay.
I'm sorry that happens. It is
what it is.
There's something to be said about what we do for our personal lives. We talked about personal growth and stuff like that. So much of what our freedom is internal, and our relationships and stuff like that. I think that all those freedoms really matter. I want people to be free. And I know that there are ways that we lack freedom in so many areas. So.
It is an interesting thing, libertarianism, in the sense that there's this accusation, this understanding, libertarianism comes from this cold, rational place of unfeeling logic. And I think that is true for a lot of people because they come to it from the right. And or they come to it from economics. Those are those two places. And there is, I don't want to pat myself on the back and say me and Dennis Pratt, we're special. But I will say that there is something different about people that come to libertarianism from the left and eventually, end up like me, a hardcore right-wing anarcho-capitalist. But when you come from it from the left, I think you see the suffering and then you start to see that the solutions offered to that suffering don't work. And the pragmatics pull you to libertarianism. And then the arguments pull you further and further and further down before you're eventually just a libertarian. And yeah, I think it's important that there is that segment of libertarianism isn't talked about enough, which is I want people to be free because I want people to stop suffering under the horrible consequences and yoke of the oppressive nature of authoritarianism. And if that makes me a consequentialist, because one of the main reasons that I want this is for people to stop suffering. Fuck it, cool, call me that, I guess, Maybe I'm not based enough. Maybe I'm still a lefty in my heart. I don't care, man. I want the government to stop spitting up families and neighborhoods and communities and chewing them and spitting them out. You've had 6,000 years. It's our fucking turn. And if you want to be a part of the solution, you probably got to get to New Hampshire.
No, please come to New Hampshire. We need builders. If you're at all excited about something, you're passionate about something, this is the place to build it. If you want to talk about it, you can stay in the Authoritarian 49. If you want to build it, come here. All
right. Well, it's nice talking to you, Dennis. Did you tell people tell people? Oh, I'm much obliged. Tell people where they can find you, where they can get more information, and also, most importantly, where they can find information on the Free State Project, who to connect with, and maybe dispel myths, rumors, make those connections, etc.
Well, if you're the vast majority of people who are just kind of libertarian, but you've heard about the New Hampshire and that type of thing, come contact me. I'll put you up at the Independence Inn. We'll give you some self-guided tours. You'll learn so much, and you'll have a great time. You'll have a blast. You can go to all of our Liberty clubhouses and do all the different things. You can actually act like a libertarian for a full week. It'll be a good time. If you're actually somebody who is ready to move, and you already know kind of what region you want to move to, there are other people to talk to. I'm really kind of more into that. Generate awareness, generate interest, get people who are somewhat interested in this to understand what it is that we're doing, because you cannot understand it by sitting in the authoritarian 49 and then generalizing from your experience there. You have to be here and actually experience it. Come for a week. So you can contact me at Dennis Pratt Free on Twitter. You can also just contact me by contacting anyone in the Free State Project. Almost everyone knows me, and I'm very available. So come out, see us. We'll see you soon.
Awesome. Well, for everyone watching, please like, share, subscribe, let everybody know, spread the message. Give us a follow wherever you're watching from. At Fabian Liberty everywhere. And stay tuned. We have some information, some new projects we're working on, especially with the YouTube, and join the Discord if you want to talk with people, do movie nights, etc., etc. And stay frosty.